Alright, so today we finally got around to getting our setup done. Actually, a couple of days. Getting our setup done to install the DROs on our little South Bend 9A. And so I was going to go through what it takes to install it and all the little pieces that have to be made. So let's move over to the bench and see what all it takes to do an installation for this. Alright, so in order to do an install on a DRO for this, I bought me a little kit off of eBay. And so we got the digital readout, we got some scales over here, and then it comes with all kinds of little brackets and things you can cut up. I cut up some pieces of that to make me some shims. But the install part, you got to make some little clamps and some little offsets, no big deal. A little plate for the X-axis to mount up, and then for the one that slides in and out. I made me a nice big old steel bracket, and what I'm doing is actually offsetting. So to do this setup, it's only going to require 4 holes to be drilled the way I'm going to do it. You could actually get away with just these 2 holes and then clamps on the ways for the other, but I'm going to go ahead and drill these and mount them permanently as well. And then a little slide bracket here. So not too hard of a kit to make. It's just aggravating because you have to put a piece on, measure it, cut it, and do all of that. I could probably make a kit out of this thing. It wouldn't be much money at all. And put this thing together. And then folks wouldn't have to go through 2 days of taking on and putting off and measuring and doing all these cuts and stuff. But anyway, let's get set up over on the lathe. And we will start the installation. We can do a little pre-install work to make things easier on us. So I'm going to start with the little bracket. So this is the bracket that goes here. Mounts on the end of it, and so what I want to do is install this little guy on here because he's going to hold the scale. So then he's going to go right there, and we need to get our clamp bolt. So what I'm going to do is clamp it down first right here, and then after I put the scale on, do all the adjustments, and I'm going to drill a hole right down through the center of that and put it down permanently. So we'll just put him on temporary right now with the clamp. Like that. Alright, so far so good. We're clamped down. So now we just want to put our plate on. And so we got us some mounting screws right here. Let's mount him up. Well, before we do that, maybe easier to go ahead and attach it to the scales. So it's a little easier because we got to put some shims in, because we're going to shim out for our guard there. So let's go ahead and get our shims set. Okay, before we do anything, we got to put our little shipping thing back in there. These come with it, but it's too wide if you use these to do the install, so what you have to do is trim them down a little bit on the sides, and then they're not in the way, and you can slide them up in there. And they're going to be how you can set the gap when you're finished. So let's go ahead and get that snugged down just a little bit. There we go. So that's loose. Now, we just want to mount that. And these holes were already in the lathe, so I didn't have to drill them, I just used them. So that one's on. This is still loose because we're going to put the assembly together right here. Alright, so now what we need to do is go ahead and set in our cover. Let's go ahead and slide him in. There we go. And then now we can put our brackets on. So what the bracket does is keeps everything away from that cover. These little guys right here that are made from the little pieces. So let's go ahead and get our screws put in. So here's where we don't want to have these drilled yet because we're mounting right now. Because this may not line up exactly. So now those are tightened up. Now what we got to do is set our height. So we got our little shipping thing in there. So that's set up good. These are still a little loose, so it'll still wiggle. That's tight. And then what we want to do is loosen everything up, and we're going to indicate the level. Because right now the whole thing is loose. And so what I want to do, since this cover is on there, I can't come down and zero to get my level on here. So what I'm going to do is slip 2 bolts in there, and I'm just going to level those guys together. And then we'll set our indicator on it. So let's get our indicator moved over onto the surface here. And so now what I want to do is sweep back and forth. So let's go running over here. Right there. And we'll zero it. So we can see we got to go up on this end just a little bit. Let's raise this end up. And there we go. So now we got it leveled up. Let's just tighten those up. Take it one more time. Alright, we're within a half thousand. Alright, so we're finished up with that one for right now. This guy's nice and level to the run, and so now what we need to do is put our little shipping thing back in there. Like that. And then we just want to tighten this axis up. So we got our shims and everything installed, and it still moves a little. So now what we want to do is pinch up on that little shipping thing, and then reach up under here and tighten up those 2 bolts. So we're pinching up on it. That way it makes sure that it's tight to the shipping clamp. Makes it a lot easier to pre-install that. There we go. And there's that. So now we got that axis installed. Wasn't too bad. And we can slide back and forth quite happily. Our little shipping guy out, we'll use that on the other axis. And so now everything is sliding. Really nice. Okay, so in order to finish up this axis, I'll go ahead and finish it up. I'm gonna drill these 2 holes right here. So that one I started out the same size as the tap. I'm going to use a 1/4-20, so a 201. So that'll be my guide as I go down. So got that one snugged in, so let's get us a drill and we'll drill down and tap those and be done with that axis. Now what we want to do is get a 1/4 tap. Let me get a 1/4 inch bit. Drill this bracket one out. And we can come in here and tap that hole. There we go. Just need to blow everything out of there. So what we'll do is come back after we get these bolted down. We'll come back and check the level of that one more time just to make sure the little clamps didn't mess up something. Alright, so let's get over here and do this other one. So for this one, the drill is not going to make it with this thing in the way. So we got to take this little arm off. So let's get that popped off real quick. There we go. That's held on one of those little Carter clips. So put that back on there. So when that pops out, I'm going to lay that to the back. There we go. So we got that axis done. Now we just want to set our indicator back on it just to make sure nothing changed. So let's set our indicator back. Yep, everything looks good. So we are done with that axis. Now we just have to put that back together. And there we go. Now that's all put together. That axis looks good. So no issues at all for mine. If I was using the collets back here, that would probably get in the way. But for me, I still got 3 inches over there before I ever even come to it. So works out great for what I'm doing. Alright, so for the short axis, it works very similar. We just got to mount everything up. So I've already took the bolt loose, so I'm going to remove this guy. Get him out of my way for just a minute so we can see. So for this axis, all we got to do is use our little plate that we made. And these holes were already here. And so we're just going to thread these guys in. And this plate mounts right onto them. Alright, so now let's see how that looks on its level, because we got to get it to where when this moves, that stays level too. I'm on 0 and you can see that washer got it pretty close. I'm off about 7 thousandths. So let's just thump that up a little bit with a hammer and we'll lock it down in place. There we go. So we're within a 1/2 thousandth. Let's just lock it down and call that one installed. Alright. That's pretty good. So now we got to establish this direction. And for that we need our other little digital indicator. Alright, so end to end we are just say 40 on the gauge. And so each one of those increments is 0.01 millimeter. So at 0.4 millimeter divided by 25.4, you're talking 15 thousandths. So we got to get a little closer than that. There we go. Right in the middle, there's a little variation, about 0.05 millimeter. Let's do the math on that. 0.05 divided by 25.4 puts us at about 2 thousandths. So that's pretty close. Close enough for this gauge, I would imagine. Alright, so that's in good shape, but now we took that off and on, so we got to check our height again. So let's go back with the other gauge. Let's drop on here and check our height. There we go. So now we're within a half thousand. Just make sure everything's tight. We're in good shape on that part. So everything's ready to go there. So now what we want to do is mount this one onto here. And so what I did is this is irregular on the surface right here. And so I just made 4 little jack screws and then 2 in the middle. And so then we can just mount this up. We know this bar is true, and so we just want to line this one up to it. And so I've already done a little work on it. So let me get this thing mounted. All I want to do is square everything up to that plate right there. So I'll get me a little piece of shim that I can slide in there. Like that. And what I want to do is raise these little guys up until that shim is free. So now we're not on the shim, now we just need to square it up so that it's the same. So that's square. So now we got all 4 of these adjusted to where they're touching. Now we just need to get the height right. Pretty tight on that, pretty tight on that. Now let's just check with the block. And we're good and level with the block. So now we just need to snug everybody down. And there we go. So everything feels good. We'll put our little catch nut on the bottom. Right there. And we should be nice and straight on this axis. That works really good. Alright, so next, all we got to do is mount the gauge on there and we're done. So let's get that mounted up real quick. So we just want to put our little modified shipping shim in there. Alright, so now all we gotta do is level up this one. As we can see on the gauge, since we did all the pre-alignment of the other, that this one is real easy to align. So we just scoot all the way this way. There we go. So we're sitting on 0. And so it's off just a few thousandths. So let's raise this one up. That one looks really good. Let's lock that down. Now all we got to do is lock this one down. So we just squeeze it up against the shipping thing again. And lock him down. And there we go. So we got our axes on. Now all we need to do is put our little guard on so we can remove the little shipping tab. There we go. So now we're in good shape on that one. All we need is our cover and we'll be complete. We can plug it up and see just how accurate these DROs are. Alright, so let's get everything slid back and we'll set our DRO readout up and let's just see how accurate everything is. Alright, so we got everything mounted up and I got this digital readout sitting out here temporarily, so let's fire it up and just see how accurate they are. So I will go ahead and move my axis to 0 and I'm going to slide this indicator. Alright, so there's 0, 0. So let's check and see just how accurate these eBay scales are. So I'm going to take her in 1 inch. Four, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And right there. So that's pretty accurate. Right there. So that's 1 inch. If we go another inch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And right there. Yeah, so that's spot on. So that's good. And then for this axis, I can move 1 inch. So on 0, so let me go, there's a 1/10. Yep, right at a 1/10. Let's cruise on up here. Oh, ran out of room. Let me move back. I hit my tool on my slide up here and do it again. There's 0. Alright, so now let's cruise up here 1 inch. Right there. Yeah, pretty accurate. Right, sitting right on it. So there we go. Well, that's a pretty good install. Going to make life a lot easier to see the display versus reading the gauges and moving this guy all over the place like I normally have to do. And I think that'll work out well, so we'll get that guy mounted on the wall and we'll call this project done. Alrighty, well thanks for watching.